Hello, Doomer Optimists. I am Julie Frederickson. I will be your host for this exciting podcast, which I imagine is going to cover quite a bit about beef and how we're eating and how you can control and be a little more sovereign in the way you eat. So, Slim, I'm going to let you introduce yourself as you are the man of the hour.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on. It's fun to always chat about what we've been doing. I've been on the ground for about 3 years doing this, and it started with a lot of food intelligence. Basically, go by Texas Slim. It is a nickname I've had all my life, so here we are. I am from Texas, and I am Slim. So, but it's something I've been working on. It's basically a deep dive into food intelligence that I started about 3 years ago, and I wanted to really look at, a lot of where I come from. I come from small town Texas. Where I came from was very agricultural ranching, as far as my ancestors, grandfathers, all that kind of stuff. Throughout my life, I've seen, a big shift of basically how I was raised, how we got here, how we pioneered into Texas many, many moons ago, and to look at our food systems and look at our health as a nation, look at, how we do not have market access to a lot of pure animal protein like we used to, and how they basically hide that fact and cause a lot of confusion and ignorance around nutrition and food itself. I think that everybody now, living, especially, to say in the United States right now, really across the globe, you can't be random with your understanding of food anymore. And you can't really rely on the apparatuses that say that they are there to keep you safe and informed. And for whatever reasons, we've gone off track. And you can look at many reasons why we've done that. And so it's pretty daunting. So, one night I said, well, I'm just going to do a hashtag called food intelligence. And then we're going to define throughout time, we're going to get to the source of the seed of the problems, and then we'll get to the source of the seed of the solutions. And one of those solutions I see is pure animal protein and, Bitcoin, decentralization, some form of decentralization of thought, that leads into a decentralization of, sound money and sound food. And so that's what we've been pursuing. And therefore I founded the Beef Initiative. So.
So tell me a little bit more about the Beef Initiative and your vision for how it's going to work as an organization, since
Mm-hmm.
the I can't imagine more pressing issues right now than how you get fed and how you make sure that you pay for the things that are feeding you.
Exactly. I talk about my ancestors, my grandfathers and everything. They had a peer-to-peer system in the local communities. That's how you used to source your food. It didn't come from 2,000 miles away. It wasn't highly processed food. Everybody in the community had so much that, from our past that we can look at and that we can kind of leverage.
Yeah.
And so as far as the beef initiative, it's taken a pause. It's looking back at how we used to source our food, how we decentralized our nutrition, and we decentralized our understanding of what true food intelligence was. And basically, the beef initiative is a vertical integration back into food, starting with the soil to the grass, to the animal, to the producer, processor, to the supplier, to, market access to the consumer. And a lot of people have tried, and you always hear farm to table and all this kind of stuff, but they're still using centralized communication apparatuses to do that. And you're never going to have success unless you start with a grassroots movement, that people that are very intentional with their lives and their consumption models, that they get involved. And so, with saying that, Beef Initiative is grass fed and grassroots. And so, what we're doing is we're doing a vertical integration back into human health, because we're metabolically bankrupt as a nation right now. And all our, if people want to deny that fact, and they're just in a form of denial. And, I just encourage them to, to pay attention, take a step back, take a pause and say, why do I desire what I desire? And
Mm.
so when you do that with food, you can say, okay, well, because it tastes good. Well, we can come up for reasons why it tastes good, and it's not good for you. And so, Beef Initiative is basically about relationship building, decentralized mindset, You heard it's about sound money, it's about sound health, it's about sound communications, for a sound future. But if I always, my why, true why, it's about saving children's lives in this nation because they're being robbed of the chances I had as a really good child to have, very sound, pure animal protein, nutritional delivery that was basically from a community, not from a foreign country. And if people really break down the global industrial food complex, they'll see that nutrition basically is the last thing that they're thinking about these days. And they're going to move forward right now. People wonder what's going on in the world with food. Well, we're going through a global industrial food shift, and a lot of people don't understand why and how it's happening. And so we bring that education, we give them market access. We have producers that have come in through the Beef Initiative from a grassroots movement. Like I say, we're not going out there, we're not a marketing plan. We're not a centralized mainstream media marketing plan. That's the last thing we'll ever be. We're basically people that want to have, the new international lifestyle of basically value for value exchange for your food. Mm-hmm. And we've got proof of work, and, we've been selling beef now since January. And people from all over the nation are starting to join in, and they're realizing that they can get their pure animal protein in a different way. And I always tell everybody, go up and shake your rancher's hand, and if you can't shake a rancher's hand, come to the Beef Initiative and you can source your protein that way.
So you've got an event coming up in September.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit more about what's happening and how we can get involved. I have 1,000 questions from the intro, but I'm trying to stay on point of, sure. We got to hit the main points, and then we can dig into the weeds.
You bet. We've already had 2 conferences this year. I'm calling this next one, it's more of a food intelligence summit.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating about this one, and these aren't about numbers. We're not getting thousands of people to come to a conference. It's not about that. It's about intentionality, people coming to these summits and these events. And what it is, it's at White Oak Pastures with Will Harris out there in Bluffton, Georgia. And if people don't know who Will Harris is he's one of the leading forces of regenerative movement in the United States from how we used to do things. And he has success. He was the first person to sell grass-fed beef through Whole Foods before, Amazon bought him. So he created his own market access to be able to sell to customers. And, he did it in a pretty decentralized way from the ground up that I spoke of, from, the soil to the grass, to the cow, to the producer processing centers. People do not understand that that's the big bottleneck of our food supply and our nutritional delivery. So we contacted Will last November, and we've had it, earmarked for September of this year. So it's a Beef Initiative Food Intelligence Summit, and Will Harris is basically hosting it. And we're going in there. We're talking about regenerative farming practices, how you get started. We're talking about heritage. We're talking about heritage women and how they used to feed the families in a decentralized, local, community-based way. We're talking, Adam Curry is going to be one of the co-hosts there, and he's going to basically be talking about decentralized communications, sound communications. We're going to talk a little bit about Bitcoin mining. We bring everything together that we can leverage now moving forward, that is more of a decentralized value for value exchange lifestyle that people can start looking at and say, hey, this is kind of a package deal that we want to look at, from homeschooling to home birthing to home mining to home sourcing your food in your local communities. What I'm really emphasizing the most about these events is that we're building out locally, but we're broadcasting globally, because everybody can do this across the world. Everybody always said, is this just a Texas thing? It's like, no, it's not. It's the United States, but it's actually truly a global movement. And right now is when it's needed the most, because you look at the Netherlands, you look at Sri Lanka, you look how people are basically, their food systems are getting debased by this big movement, this global industrial food shift. People need to start paying attention, because it's coming. Yeah. And it's going to happen. I mean, this has been planned for a while. People just aren't aware of it yet.
I had I'm going to use the term horrifying experience last week, where I went to a local cooperative. So I actually just moved to Montana from Colorado
Okay.
and I'm in Bozeman, so Bose Angeles, it's the yuppiest of all possible towns.
Right.
But we have a really great food co-op that does quite a bit to label everything. They actually distinguish between local and regional. Yeah, one town is pretty big, but I went to go pick up groceries for the week, and I saw a sign that said, "Get yourself." It was either Impossible Burger. I can't remember which brand, but basically spend $4 for two patties of fake meat.
Hmm.
And the experience of going to a co-op where I normally trust their sourcing on, we really care about our ranchers, we care about where our actual meat is coming from, having this big national brand of not food
Yeah.
advertised as I walk in the door.
Well, that's the capture. That's what people don't understand, how far our agricultural system has been captured.
Mm.
And you look at 1971, whenever we went off the gold standard and our money got debased. Well, at the same time, our food got debased. What I always like to kind of simplify so people can understand is that they started creating these new fake commodities,
Mhm.
introducing and injecting those fake commodities into our food systems. And you look at, always a good one to look at is seed oils, with rapeseed and, canola oil. Well,
Yep.
canola oil is in everything. Well, it's not needed. We don't need it, but they've always planted, it's a high profit commodity, and it's a fake commodity. You can use it as motor oil, but we use it as food. And if you look at the history of how they basically orchestrate these things, you can see a lot of fake commodities throughout the last 50 years that have been stacked and injected into our food supplies. And right now, what's going on? Because there's a war on beef. They're using the climate change narrative, saying that cows are a carbon hazard now. This is a monetary reset, and they're basically orchestrating a food industrial reset so they can still making their high profit margins. People will think that they're a good consumer, and they're going to lie on the labels saying it's heart healthy, it's got protein in it, and none of that is factual, none of it's true. And that's how far corrupt our labeling laws have gotten within the United States, and how corrupt the FDA is as far as policing the type of chemicals and ingredients that they're allowing in, and the USDA is backing it. And people go, oh, no, that can't be true. But it is. And, this last October, FDA won a lawsuit where they can basically, using the GRAS rule, GRAS, generally recognized as safe, they can inject 2,000 new chemicals into our food supply, and they don't have to tell us what they are. And so if people look at that, they can go, whoa, whoa, wait. Most people can't pronounce any of the ingredients in their food anymore. They don't look at labels. They look at basically the marketing. And food has become nothing more than a marketing plan. It has nothing to do with really the nutrition of the food itself. And that's what they're doing with fake meat, from pea proteins to soy proteins to grain, whatever you want to call it. And they're not going to stop. They've spent hundreds upon hundreds of billions of dollars to be able to do this new type of processing, and it steals nutrition out of your diet. And then, but they're going to make you feel like you're saving the planet.
Yeah. It's fascinating in the wake of the pandemic to watch how many people are starting to realize that their health was never that good to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
As more people discuss, oh, well, maybe I have long COVID, maybe I'm having a reaction to any number of issues, whether we want to go down a vaccine hole, people are starting to realize that maybe they don't feel that great. And trying to heal your basic fundamental health is a real challenge if you don't know what you're eating, if you don't know what's going into your body. And
Mm-hmm.
even if you go somewhere like Costco, where you think, oh, like here's a loaf of bread, and then you look at the ingredients, and there's a lot in there beyond wheat.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's the fake commodities and the chemicals that, think about those fake commodities in each one of those individual chemicals. Because each one of those ingredients is that you cannot pronounce is a chemical, basically, that they've engineered. It's something that we have done to the food. Well, how many millions of dollars does each one of those ingredients make to be in that product on a global scale? It's daunting. It's huge. So therefore, we're the recycling bin.
In Bloomberg Commodities yesterday, there was an article about the basically corn yields are in a rough place because there's been a lot of drought. Fertilizers are getting increasingly expensive, and we functionally socialize much of the corn crops in America. We definitely give a lot of money to that. But
Mm-hmm.
what's your perspective on what happens as some of these core commodities become just untenably expensive? Do you
Well,
think
we have an orchestration that is man-made right now. All of this is about to play out. I said last year, I guess I was I embedded myself in a harvest company last year, and I needed to get deeper into the grain industry and what was going on. So I did that, and I kind of left, and I wrote, my first article was The Harvest of Deception. And what I talked about is like, well, they're going to orchestrate a food supply shortage sometime in 2023, probably fall going into, or 2022 going into 2023. And when you look at fertilizer, well, there's not fertilizer. The reason it's expensive is because they don't have it.
Yeah.
And so therefore you're going to drive the price up. Well, whenever these guys that basically, use fertilizer can't afford to fertilize, then they don't grow as much grain. So there is a grain shortage. We have a lot of people don't understand where grain comes from. Wheat comes 33% of the global wheat comes from Russia and Ukraine. Well, that's not coming this year. China has capacity to control about 60% of, the global grain right now. They're not going to get rid of it. And, the United States has, access to it. But what you have is you have a delayed result here. And so whenever you don't have fertilizers for whatever reason, that's just, you don't have to figure it out. It's just, it's not there. And whenever you don't have fertilizer, you're not going to have grain, especially during a drought season. So when you don't have grain, well, your commodities that you use as far as to feed your other commodities, which is American beef and poultry and hog, which they're all, in the commodity markets, then you're going to have less production. When you have less production, it's not that these guys, these industrial corporations are going to make less money. No, they're going to hike the price up. So you can design a food supply shortage in many different ways. And if it's man-made, like I said it is, let's say you basically turn beef into caviar. Well, what do you do when that? Well, you got to supplement, right? You got to subsidize the food system. Well, they've already known what they're going to subsidize the food system is, and that's with fake meat and these fake commodities that they can leverage into our food supply as they design and engineer a food supply shortage in the United States. It's coming. And, I talked to a
It
lot of
seems like
different
it's
people.
already here.
It is. People just don't realize it because, we've become very complacent, within our consumption models. We just see food on the shelves, and that's where most people think. I ask people, I just drove 14,000 miles across this country. And, I ask people, where does food come from? Well, it comes from, the supermarket, it comes from Costco, it comes from, Walmart. They don't really know. And it's not a judgment against them. This is where we've gotten to as a society, is that we don't understand market access. We don't understand what market access even means. And who controls that market access is these global corporations that are basically bottlenecking our food supply. It's happening. And people, it's hard to wake up to it because you can go anywhere in this country and get food.
Well, and beef in particular as an industry is quite centralized. Can you
Mm-hmm.
talk a little bit more about the three, and I guess maybe it's four main
It's
producers that have
for, yeah, yeah.
access?
Well, yeah, what people don't realize in the United States, we used to have microprocessing centers all across this nation. In Texas, right now, we have over 200 microprocessing centers that have been mothballed. We don't use anymore. And they used to feed the communities. They didn't have to, process in this big conglomerate processing center. So when you say processing and packaging, it's the same thing, really. And they're the ones that create the market access. So we have JBS, we have Cargill, we have National, and Tyson in the United States. Three of those are international corporations, like JBS is out of Brazil. So what they're able to do is they're able to come into our country. We have our producers, our animal producers, our ranchers, let's say, and they cow calf operations, and they'll raise that calf into a heifer, into a fat cow is basically what it is. At a certain point, they need to basically either process that cow themselves and sell it locally. That's what they would like to do. They would love to take that cow all the way through the fruition of harvesting and then to your plate, but they can't do that anymore. It's controlled by these four major corporations, and a lot of those corporations have been fined hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars even in this last decade from price manipulation and the type of control they have on our food supply. Is, the Department of Justice should be investigating and they should be all over this crap, but they're not, because there's so much corruption within the food supply itself. And the one thing that the reason people don't pay attention to it is because they accept the consumer demand. They are the consumer demand, and they won't change their consumer demand, for one, because they don't know how. Two, they don't know really that it's needed. So if you want to look what's really the issue, and I say it every day, it's the processing centers. And you look at like beef, let's just say beef. Well, it's not that beef is going away. They're just not going to give you market access to beef in the United States. Some of the best beef in the United States is not sold in the United States. It's sold on the global market by these processing and packing companies. Our best beef gets sold to China, Japan, South Korea, Europe, and we don't get market access. A lot of Texas beef, Texans don't eat that beef. It gets shipped off because these global processing centers have these global contracts. And when they're that big, because they're big contracts, it gets into governments have signed these contracts. And so to have market access to a big volume of that product.
So what can I do as an individual consumer? Because I'm definitely going to the grocery store, noticing price changes, noticing that it is harder and harder to get things that are clearly labeled. Now, even when I'm shopping at a local cooperative where I mostly trust what's happening with the buying, there's clearly some issues already manifesting. And I think if you follow commodities at all, my gut reaction is this is only going to get worse. I should probably be buying a whole steer this winter.
Yeah, it hadn't even started yet. I think that's what I hear, especially with this drought this year.
Yeah.
So what I tell everybody, if you can, you need to basically go out and shake a rancher's hand. You're in Bozeman, Montana. What you
I
need
got a
to
lot
do,
of options.
yeah, you need to go out there and shake somebody's hand. And like I said, the Beef Initiative is about relationship building. And one thing that people need to do is build relationships with those who want to feed you, those who live to feed you. They don't have a voice anymore. And they don't have a voice is because of these major global processing centers have squeezed off market access as far as the consumer demand, but also they don't have a digital voice. You have a rancher. Was he going to build a website these days? No. I mean, is he going to get on Facebook? Well, they try. Or what are they going to have a consolidation of a farmer's market that most people don't know how to pay attention to. And it's just, I don't know what's going to be there. The selections aren't as good or whatever. It's up to the individual now to put their foot down and say, I'm going to basically create a new consumer demand in my own household. And that's by building a relationship with those who want to feed me. And if you go up to a rancher and you shake their hand and you say, hey, he or she, and you say, hey, why do you do what you do? Would you tell me a little bit about it? Where do you come from? How can I help? Would you educate me? And then you basically, once you develop that relationship and that trust, you can have that conversation and say, well, I need to feed my family. Will you help me out? And they'll be glad to. And if you can't do that, you're in Bozeman, you can do that. If you're somewhere like in, let's say Atlanta, in your big city, and you can't get out of the city, well, that's why the Beef Initiative is here, because we have all these producers coming in. You can search the Beef Initiative, and hopefully at this time, because it is grassroots, I scraped the internet several times getting all the grass-fed farmers and ranchers, and that's not the way to do this. It's one at a time. It's one producer at a time. So you can search for a producer. But if you want, I mean, the Beef Initiative has been selling beef boxes now for over since January, but we're delivering across the United States through 48 states, and our volume is up. We have that vertical integration through the processing center. It's our own processing centers. We control the market access. And so it's touch point, it's peer to peer. And you can buy in fiat or you can buy in Bitcoin. And right now, I mean, we've done over hundreds of thousands of beef through the Beef Initiative at this point. So there's several options there, and it's going to be different for everybody. If you want to go out there and have a different lifestyle with your food, you can go out there and do it. But I just encourage everybody, because we have all kinds of intelligence, all kinds of information coming through the Beef Initiative, through the platform itself, through my podcast itself, through the Substack that I write. And so, and we're not selling right now. What we're doing is educating and giving you market access to a different consumer demand.
Yeah, I would argue that educating is the best form of selling because
It
nothing
is.
speaks like the truth.
Yes. And that's whatever I tell everybody, all the ranchers that I have met and come through the Beef Initiative at this point in time, every one of them, they said, man, I'm not selling anything. I'm an educator. I want to educate people because they really believe in what they do. And what they do is what got us here in the first place. You look at our health as a nation and you look how we eat this type of food. It's a small point of time in the history of man. It's 50 years, which is nothing. And it's not too late to say, hey, no more. We're not going to do this anymore. Once again, why do I desire what I desire? Understand how they manipulate taste buds to, make you think something is good and that you crave it. I mean, food is a drug.
Mm-hmm.
And food is medicine. So medicine is food if you allow it to be, or medicine can be a drug that is detrimental, or food can be a drug that is detrimental to you. But it depends on your own level of food intelligence to understand that. And you can't rely on this labeling laws anymore. Grass fed, organic, they don't even put GMO now, it's bioengineered. The confusion is real. The propaganda is real with food, and it's coming. And they're going to make people believe that their consumption model is going to save the planet, and then you have ESG. I mean, it goes deep, but it's so simple, it's complicated. And what people just need to realize is get a freezer full of beef and you're not going to have any food insecurity. If you have the means, buy a cow. That'll feed a family of 4 for a year, So there's ways to go about it right now to where you don't have to participate in all the propaganda and all the deception. And if you get intentional with it, there's solutions out there.
I think the health aspect is particularly acute right now as more people are looking to say, oh, maybe my immune system isn't all that I thought. So I have a chronic inflammatory disease that I'm convinced I can actually cure. And the doctors are like, well, maybe not so much. But over the years, by improving diet and looking at the root causes of inflammation, I definitely feel better. And I'm very curious about how you think about just because at the heart of it, family health is really, if you don't have that, you're not surviving anything.
Mm-mm.
And I think mothers in particular right now are starting to realize that we can't take for granted any of our supply chain, any of our food, because the pandemic just revealed so many weaknesses. And now we're concerned, we're sick, we're fat, we can't seem to grapple with the width of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, what are some of those first steps? Because from my perspective, I just did a complete, my diet looks very different than it looks 10 years ago because I just didn't know.
Yeah. Well, that's for everybody. I mean, we have perceptions that we need all these options within food. And that's, once again, that's the ignorance of what food truly is. Where did it come from? Where does nutrition come from? It comes from minerals. Where does the true mineral come from? It comes from the ground. And so, what I tell everybody is, your consumption model of audio, video, and food needs to change.
Mm.
Within the Beef Initiative itself, we have, physicians that, kind of report to me and everything. And we, give them a stage to where they can kind of tell, from their perspective, what they see and what they recommend to people as far as wanting to change their diets. And basically you have to do basically a reset. You just, what you talk about inflammation and inflammatory diseases, most of them, 90% of everything that I've heard from the medical field, the ones that are actually truly intentional about helping people and not just prescribed drugs, but actually doing it the old school way, is that our highly processed food industry causes most of that inflammation, from seed oils to high fructose corn syrup to the high carbohydrates. Highly processed food is basically one of the driving factors in diabetes, inflammation, heart disease. Every one of them is because of our food consumption. And people just, whoa, the cognitive dissonance is real. But once again, a lot of the times, if you're very intentional and you mean well, as far as trying to do the right thing, you're not getting deep enough within the understanding in basically the product that actually is going to help you out. Most people you don't have to be a carnivore full on. What you have to do is you have to eat clean food. What is clean food? Something that on animals, no chemicals, no GMO grain, no antibiotics, no steroids, none of that stuff. Same with your store. I don't shop at the supermarket anymore. Very little, very little. You can't say never, because you have to have certain things. But I tell people, quit shopping on the inside out aisles, shop on the outside aisles. And that's the only thing that you can consume. Quit giving yourself all these fabricated options that you feel that are supposed to be good for you nutritionally. It's not. It's very simplistic. And if you look at pure animal protein as being the base layer value of your nutritional delivery, and you stick to that, it's a great first step.
So in May, I think it was May, the year is flying by. I was in Miami for Bitcoin Miami, and Coin Center had a dinner in which they went full on seed oil disrespecter, and it was large, a couple hundred-person dinner in which everything was cooked with animal fats. And it was so fun to listen to the conversation around it because the food was amazing. It was just a great, great piece of beef, potatoes that were cooked in lard, and a salad. And it was just, wow, this is real food. Yeah. And it's interesting to watch Bitcoin as a community grapple with this idea of adulteration, because the metaphors are fairly simple, right? If you go back to Nixon and gold standard, the idea that maybe you shouldn't mess with basics, it seems to me, at least, I don't know, aesthetically, there's some sort of connection there. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you see the Bitcoin and beef as an overlap, because it's taken hold in the imagination of the Bitcoin community in particular. And I'm wondering why it is Bitcoin seems to have been a little bit faster to the, oh yeah, they've adulterated our food.
Well, I mean, Bitcoin it's a no-brainer to me, how I was raised. I mean, every rancher that I ever knew was decentralized in the way he thought, how he communicated. And a lot of his monetary exchange was on more of a barter than anything else. And so you look at, and you also look at the ranchers and, farmers of the past. Well, let's say where was the store of value of a cow? Well, in the past, it was in the land or in the cow itself. Now it's in the USDA insurance policy. So let's look at, Bitcoin as a decentralized peer-to-peer transactional system that is a store of value. I mean, there's never been a better tool. I mean, my grandfather knew about Bitcoin, but he didn't have Bitcoin. And now that we have it, the mindset's already there, and the ranchers are starting to figure it out. I always tell people there's going to be a rancher out there that innovates farther than any other Bitcoiner could ever do, because they understand decentralization in a better way than a lot of people that adopt Bitcoin as a mindset. And I say the most important thing about Bitcoin and beef is the decentralized mindset first, then a store of value. And then how do we transact, and how do we do a peer-to-peer exchange that helps both sides of the party? And you have your hodlers, you have everybody saying, oh no, you can't use Bitcoin, you just need to sit on it. No, you're going to sit, you're going to use something that has a value for value exchange. There's nothing better in the world right now, especially in these days and times, to trade and barter with Bitcoin and beef. And people are starting to figure that out, because you can't go up to a rancher that's barely making it. Everybody thinks ranchers are rich. No, they're not, especially the regenerative ones. They usually work 1 or 2 or 3 jobs. They're doing this because they love it. It's a passion. I don't go up to a guy and say, hey, you need to buy some Bitcoin, or hey, do you accept Bitcoin? No, you go up there, you establish a relationship. But one thing you give them through education as they educate you is you give them the opportunity to earn Bitcoin through proof of work. That's what they know.
Mm.
Bitcoin is based on proof of work. A regenerative farmer and rancher, or any rancher, is based on proof of work. So if you have that value for value, you're going to use Bitcoin to do that exchange, value for value, Bitcoin and beef. That rancher can go in there and save 10% of that transaction in Bitcoin if he wants. If he wants to do 50, he can do it in 50. If he wants to do 2.7% because he doesn't have to pay the credit card company, there you're getting adoption in different levels. And you, the Bitcoiner, are helping innovate and get Bitcoin to where it is being used, but it's also being used as a store of value for the future, legacy building, heritage reflection, and basically a new base layer of value in our food systems. That if you keep on going down the path, man, you're going to get trapped into a food system that you can't escape. Many people are already there.
Yeah. That's been my concern going into this winter in particular, is that I don't know how trapped I am going to be into certain systems, because figuring out what I'm even needing to extricate myself from can seem so intimidating. And I don't, I guess I am relatively informed comparatively, and it still feels almost impossible. Like, if prices continue to go up, if you have no visibility into why they're going up, what are you even supposed to do?
You
And
can't.
yeah, it's just, and I feel like I'm screaming to the rooftops to people, being, just fill the freezer, go, like,
Mm-hmm.
buy half a steer, put that money in. But I don't necessarily know that everyone is even able to process the basics of it, because we have made it so unnecessarily complicated, and it's so easy to just go to Safeway and buy some pretty mediocre food-like substance.
Yeah, it is. And once again, that's the complacency that's been driven by yearning of convenience. It's what our society is. And it's not a judgment. We're all victims of it. And we all perpetuate the problems and the issue within it. And for those, it's kind of like Bitcoin. You always say, well, you find Bitcoin when you deserve to,
Mm.
and it's the same thing with this new type of food system that we're going. This is not the first time this has happened in the history of man. It's happened many, many times, but people, once again, they don't understand history to the level that they need to. But this is something that even happened in the 70s. I was a child of the 70s. I'm generational X. What we saw in the 70s, they did introduce TV dinners, they did introduce the microwave, they did introduce sizzling, they did introduce certain soy products into the school systems, all because they had to basically interject a new fake commodity into our agricultural system that produced higher yields and higher profits, because our dollar was debased, so they have to create even higher profits so they can actually stay in control. And that's what they're doing right now. So, like I said, there's going to be many people that don't change because they don't know how to change, but also probably can't change because of their health. They're so far gone with their health, they don't know how to stop, because food is a drug. Most people have to eat every 4 hours or they get hungry, and they don't understand why they're always hungry, but they're snacking and they're trying to eat right. Well, you're just doing insulin spikes, and here, let's go do it again. And once again, we're not taught nutrition. We're not taught basically, what health is. We don't, metabolical health. Nobody really understands it to the level they should as individuals. And we never really had. What we had, a driving force, was pure animal protein and animal fats. And that's how we got here. And they've demonized it so much that people really can't get their mindset is thinking that, oh, I'm going to have a massive heart attack if I consume animal fat, because it's going to cholesterol and that's going to clog up my arteries, or it's going to cause cancer. Well, you go back and understand history of what has happened. Look at Ansel Keys, what he started with the cholesterol lie back after, Eisenhower had a heart attack. There's so much that people do not understand, but they don't take the time to go out there and understand it. And when they do, they're reading the wrong literature, because that literature is being driven by the shell companies that are the grain companies, the chemical companies. And so a modern day nutritional person might have been taught the food pyramid and thinking that the food pyramid is something that is of health. No, it's been a disaster ever since they introduced that in the late, I guess it was kind of in the late 80s into the early 90s.
And as you look at the health crises that have ensued, it's pretty clear something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you mentioned just because people are sick, they can't change because you're fat, you're tired, you're overwhelmed. What are some of the basics that you can even do? Because one of the things that shocked me most as I tried to get my own health under control is how much worse you feel before you start getting better.
Yeah. Well, you look at that's a tough one, but what I'll tell you from a doctor's mouth. Dr. Mary Kerr, she's here in Texas, and she spoke at one of our conferences. She says one of the biggest things that she really recommends, and she's a medical doctor and she's a functional medicine doctor. So what she recommends, and she'll have people come to her, that are metabolically corrupted, let's say, they're having health issues, inflammation, maybe high blood pressure, maybe obesity, whatever it is, diabetes, borderline diabetes. She tells every one of them, you need to do a 48-hour bone broth fast.
Mm-hmm.
You need to do a reset. Well, what a reset is you basically stop consuming everything that you're consuming, and you do a reset. You do a fast. A lot of people don't like that word. What's going to
I'm
happen?
surprised how hostile people are to the concept of fasting, despite it being a core element of every religion that anyone has ever.
It's how we got here.
Yeah.
That once again, the separation of true knowledge and true facts, and that's where we are. The cognitive dissonance is real in this nation when
I
it's around
regularly
food.
fast, and I
I've
get
always fasted.
so many complaints from people being like, "Are you sure? That's definitely going to make you sicker. You can't do that."
Well,
And
that's what they don't understand about how the body has to detoxify everything that you consume. They don't understand that your skin is your second stomach, and everything that touches your skin gets basically broke down by your body. If it can't break it down, it stores it as fat cells. They don't understand the apparatus that we have that basically, breaks down all of these chemicals, all of this food. They don't understand how it works. And if you give yourself a chance, your body, your metabolical, system, a chance to purge itself in a healthy way that they've been doing for thousands of years, then that's a great first step, because most people, their brains are inflamed at this time. This is from neurologists telling me this. People come in there, they don't understand, and they won't give themselves a chance because they're scared. And if you quit eating, if you're overweight and you're doing a lot of sugar, a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of processed foods, you look at, drug addiction, you look at somebody that's an alcoholic and they get off of alcohol and they've been drinking and their body is, addicted to that alcohol. Well, alcohol is nothing but sugar. So you go through a form of detox, right? Well, same with food now that it's so loaded. We used to consume about 3 pounds of sugar a year for each individual. Now the average is close to 140 pounds of sugar, and it's not even sugar anymore. It's a highly processed type of sweetener, high fructose corn syrup to anything. White bread is nothing but a cup of sugar, and people don't realize that. So whenever you quit eating and consuming that, your body goes through a system, your mind goes through a system, and it's a little nerve-wracking, it's a little scary, and it seems overwhelmingly daunting to even approach it. And so a lot of the pushback you get is cognitive dissonance. A lot of it's fear too. A lot of it's not understanding. And so a lot of people watch too much, too much of the mainstream media anymore. And I don't watch TV. I haven't watched TV in years. I don't consume. Like I say, you need to change your consumption model of your audio, your video, and your food. If you do that, your life is going to change. I've never had anybody, not one single person, come up to me and say, "Oh, that was horrible. I can't believe you even suggested that," as far as, recommendations. Or the only thing I hear is almost 100% is, "This is changing my life and it's changing my family's life." Same with the doctors, heart surgeons. I have a heart surgeon, Dr. Philip Ovadia. He was overweight, he was obese, and now he was a heart surgeon. I said, "How much did you how much did you learn in medical school about nutrition? And he said about 30 minutes. That's it, a heart surgeon. And so he had to revamp his whole, practice. And now he's healthy. He lost his weight and he went towards more of a pure animal protein consumption model. And this is a heart surgeon. And that's what people can't wrap their heads around. He's not afraid of cholesterol. He's not afraid of animal fats because he got to the core of the truth.
Well, I think what's so fascinating about food in particular is that if you just look at the financials of the industry and where the commodities are coming from and what we're paying for them and how it got wrapped into different types of federal policy, everything sounds a little bit like a conspiracy theory, except that it's all true. We very much do have vested interests, heavy consolidation, quite a bit of, no industry is more socialized than corn at this point because we've thrown just billions, probably trillions at this point, of money at subsidizing something because
Yeah.
it's cheap and easy and industrial to do so, but also whose agenda are you serving by consuming that? Probably not your own family's agenda. Now, nobody in your family wants to be sick, but if you continue to eat off of the food pyramid, you're probably going to have some suboptimal health issues.
Yeah, and that people don't realize how subsidized our food is, on a global standpoint, the global contracts. In that, whenever we did go out there and we said, Eric Butts with Nixon, in 1971 said, hey, we're going to go big or go home.
Yeah.
You're going to go fence to fence or you're not going to be a farmer anymore because we got to feed the world. And they use all that propaganda saying, feed the world. Well, we never fed the world. What they did is they increased their profit margins and their yields. And by doing that, they made food very cheap. And whenever you have a society that consumes food from convenience stores and Dollar Generals and Walmarts, you're not feeding the world. What you're doing is you're overfeeding, yes, some type of substance, but what you're doing is you're causing a nutritional starvation. And that's what truly is going on. And it's never really happened in the history of man like it is going on right now. And it's hard for people to look and get that accountability mirror and look at it because it is based on how they feel every second of every day and how we use food as a tool, as a comfort. Well, all of our ancestors didn't use food as a comfort. They used it as a survival mechanism and they made sure it was the best food that they could get. So they were strong enough to function and basically be able to be productive in life. Now that we've become so complacent, we don't have the same drive or the same intention when it comes to food. And even when we do, like we said, I mean, you might be getting the wrong information. There's no conspiracies out there, man. This is not about conspiracy.
It's all out
This
in
is
public.
about saving lives. This is about saving children's lives. You look at our country right now, and I'll go toe to toe with anybody on this. 46% of our children in the United States right now are either obese or overweight. 1 out of 2 of them already have diabetes or going to diabetes. We have 5 to 10-year-olds coming into the doctor's offices and having fatty liver diseases, which is usually the result of a man being in his 70s, been drinking his whole life. That is because of the consumption model in which we are consuming from. That is the industrial food complex, and you cannot argue the facts. And if people say, well, that's just that society over there, that's just, no, it's across the board. It's not, of course, it's going to be on the poverty level, but it's also all the way up the ladder of monetary value in the United States.
Well, there's
And
something particularly twisted about the fact that only the wealthy in America are actually they're the only ones that have the resources to really eat this way because
right.
they can spend money to fix it. But it's also a problem that you can fix by just putting more attention onto it. That you actually can buy local and it might not be cheaper, but you know what's not cheap? Being sick, missing
Yeah.
work, having
Well,
your
that's
BF.
a great point, and a lot of ranchers tell me that too. It's like, I wish people would really understand the health and cost benefit. Oh, that's buying from, oh, that's too expensive. No, it's really not, especially now with food prices. You can buy through the beef initiative and we're hand in hand with the same price or even
Mhm.
cheaper
Yeah.
hamburger meat right now. I don't know. A lot of people paying 7, 8. a pound. I mean, I think we average, I think it's about 5.99, 6.99 a pound. And so you look at that, but then let's really focus on, well, what does that do for your health? Well, when you start eating pure regenerative, pure animal protein, your health is going to improve. And you're going to really realize what true food tastes like again, because there's no chemicals. You're going to say, wow, this does taste different. And
Astonishingly better. To
it
the point
is.
where you wonder, how did I ever eat something that was this, facsimile, simulacra of something that is just not food, just fundamentally was never food.
It never was. And, one thing that I see that people really don't understand is how they use the word like food science.
Hmm.
Well, I'm here to tell you food is not science, man. Food is biology. And if you think that food is science, man, you are captured mentally, in a way that you need to take a second and take a look at really what that means. And they're really pushing that, food is science and that science will save our food industry. No, that's just one. You want to talk about conspiracy theories right there, because you don't have to spend more money. What you have to do is your desire needs to change to where you're going to have an intentionality, basically, that you're going to be in control of knowing where that food truly came from. You don't have to play the game of like reading a label saying, something is grass fed and it's USDA, but it's actually from Australia or Brazil or Africa, but they don't have to tell you that.
Yeah. Well, and especially if having now spent a lot of time in chronic disease communities, we
Mm-hmm.
do have a fair amount of information on things like how our own gut biome connects back into food. And I've met a number of people who are just convinced that they're lactose intolerant and then drink raw milk and discover, oh, actually, maybe it was fine all along. It's just that, my stomach was not in a place where it could process anything.
If they
And
only knew what they've done in the pasteurization of dairy in this country,
yeah,
and that's why people became lactose intolerant. I mean, when you boil milk, I'm sorry, it
kills
is
everything off.
it kills everything. And when you strip it, all of the animal fats out of milk,
Yeah.
you're eating something or you're consuming something that is basically turned into a chemical, but it came in its raw natural form that actually got us here. It really helped us evolve as humanity, because raw milk was one of the most treasured things from, and especially in this country, that's what you consumed. And, me growing up, you had the milk delivered to your front porch. That's not that far ago that all of this was happening. It's not that long ago in the United States of America, almost every family owned a dairy cow. And people just don't realize that because we don't understand history. And now they're telling you that it's cow farts and that, pure animal protein and fat is going to kill you. And people believe that. Well, why do they believe that? Why do they believe that? Well, their core belief system and their thought processes have been manipulated in ways that they do not understand, and they're refusing to accept. And if you can accept that, hey, there might be an issue here, let me, as the strong individual or the one that wants to be informed, if I take a second and I really look at this, not from a political standpoint, man, this has nothing to do with politics. This has to do with pure food. And you can look at how in society, how they've choked out pure nutrition to societies throughout the time of, recorded history. It's not something new. It's just new to us.
Yeah. Well, this is what's been so fascinating to me about people who study gut biome and reactions within it is realizing that a lot of what makes our bodies tick are symbiotic processes with our own bacteria. And if that gets
Sure.
killed off, of course you can't digest anything.
No.
And I genuinely do not know how people get out of that stuck cycle because there are all kinds of silly barriers. Just to give an example, in Colorado, I had to own the cow in order to get raw milk. So we had these elaborate cooperatives where you would own a portion of the cow. And not most people just aren't going to go through that process of saying that maybe I need to start taking some extra steps. Fortunately, Montana is better. You're allowed to basically do whatever you like here,
Mm-hmm.
fortunately, but not everyone is living in those situations. I guess there's a little bit of like horseshoe theory there, right? Where I grew up in sort of a hippie leftist, like Mountain West family, where back to the land was what you cared about because that was just, the heritage of where you came from. But hippies and more of the conservatives are starting to realize that they have the same basic set of interests, which is you should not be allowing anyone to adulterate the basic stuff of your life, which is food, which is money, which is your own
Hmm.
health.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, this is this is not a politics. This is not a hippie or a conservative thing.
Yeah. At this
And
point,
it,
the whole world is starting to coalesce around realizing that
yeah,
it was about the money all along.
yeah, exactly. And it always has been. And, this is not even a vegan or a carnivore discussion, man. It's about pure food. And, I have friends that are vegans, but, if you're a vegan and you're consuming from a monocrop, market access system, you're being cheated. Bottom line, man, go out there and find somebody that you're going to buy your food from, your produce from, that basically where it came from, and animal rights. Well, if you're a vegan and you're doing monocropped, type of vegetables, how many millions of animals are you killing every year through monocrops agricultural systems? So once again, and of course, if you're factory farming beef on the high global scale, like we do in the United States, because of the processing centers, it's not the ranchers, it's the processing center packers, which are the globalists. Yeah, I mean, there's some bad things that go on with factory farming. Like I said, it's not the producers doing this, it's the global freaking food providers. And so from monocropping and vegans to factory farming and calving and, beef, it's the same problem. And that's what people, I think that over time they come to realize is like, wow, okay, we can work together to make sure our food systems are a little bit more pure and I have better market access to that pure food.
And that is certainly the doomer optimist perspective that we can't continue to live like this, but there are solutions, and regionalism in particular is going to give you a lot of, it's going to give you a leg up because
Yeah.
you will actually have a chance to know where your food is from.
Yeah. And that's what I tell everybody because we go back to Butts and what he said. He says, we're going to go feed the world. It's like, okay, everybody, let's take a step back.
Feed your
Who do
neighbor
you feed
things
first?
okay.
You
Yeah.
need to feed yourself first. It's, like if you're a parent, it's like being in a plane, oxygen mask. Okay, well, I'm going to put my mask on first, and then I'm going to put it on my child. If you're a parent and you want to do things right, well, we quit thinking on a global scale when it comes to food. Think locally, build out locally, broadcast globally so we can scale this across the globe because it's needed. The Netherlands, Sri Lanka, United States of America. How much land did we sell this year to globalists? Farmland, tons, hundreds of thousands of acres. From Bill Gates to China, that's over a half a billion, basically acreage that we've already lost it forever, man. Here we go. So who has control of that? Well, the people that are the same ones that just injected everybody, same ones that are, creating ESG, same ones that want to vaccine you forever, same ones that want to do, a monetary reset, same ones that want to do a centralized digital currency. It's not hard to figure out. And one of the most important things you can have right now is direct market access to food that you trust.
Well, it seems like a pretty good note to wrap up on.
Yeah,
What?
that was a pretty
Yeah.
good conversation.
Well, and it's possible you can do it. So where can people find you? Because
Sure,
giving resources such that people can take the first step seems like,
it is.
yeah,
And
winter is both literally and figuratively coming.
it's here, and don't be, you really do. It's all, remember, market access. And what I try to do is give market access to information. So beefinitiative.com, of course, to get started. If you're first just being introduced to this, my Substack, texasslim.substack.com. My Twitter is at modern T man. The Beef Initiative Twitter is at Beef Initiative. You start there. I have a podcast. You can do a search. It's Texas Slim's Vision. I mean, the unlimited content with unlimited interviews with ranchers, with doctors, with, everybody in the industries. The information is out there, but it's more in a decentralized, like I said, we're grassroots. We're not a centralized marketing plan. And so a lot of people need to, be intentional with their consumption model when it comes to audio, video, and food. If you kind of start changing now, you're going to find that direct information that's probably going to really help you out and give you some security and give you some sovereignty, at least in your mind first. And then you can make those changes.
Yeah, step by step.
It is. It is.
And whew, I like to think that I'm living proof that it is entirely possible and that it will do you some good because
It
I am
does.
about as exposed to bad diet and all of the systems, from capitalism on down. And you can take a step out and you can choose to live a different life.
You really can. I mean, it does, like I said, it's daunting, but you don't have to play in that game anymore. We're proof of work. Well, I have people writing me every day. I can't get to all the messages I get that saying, "Hey, man, you just changed my life. Hey, man, we have a freezer. We're feeling great." We're just story after story after story. I'm not a salesman, man. I'm just a poor, small town West Texas boy that has a skill set that I used and that, I wanted to go out there and, like I say, let's start saving some children's lives. But it starts with the parents, the soon to be parents, to really say, hey, we're not going to play this game anymore. We're going to do something different.
All right. I'll wrap it there.